Apocalypse, from the Greek apocalypsis, composed of the prefix apo, which means separation, and the suffix kalyptein, which means to hide, therefore to remove the veil, unveiling, revelation. In the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 1, we read,
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him, to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass.
The first three chapters deal with the judgment over the seven churches of Asia Minor. From chapter 4 to chapter 8, the throne of God and the opening of the seven seals by the Lamb are described. The seventh seal kicks off the seven angels with the seven trumpets up to chapter 11. From chapter 12 to 15, the seventh trumpet opens the way to the seven angels with the last seven plagues or cups up to chapter 17. Chapters 17 and 18 describe the fall of Babylon the Great and of the great harlot who sits over many peoples. Chapter 19 describes the victory over the harlot, the false prophet, and the wild beast, joy and triumph in the heaven, and the marriage of the Lamb to the chosen bride. In chapter 20, Satan, the serpent of old, the deceiver of the world, is bound for 1,000 years. At the end, he is untied to be judged and eliminated along with all the wicked forever. The final chapters 21 and 22 describe the rejoicing of the new heavens and the new earth, the coming down from heaven of the new Jerusalem, and the healing of all nations. The book of Revelation begins with the judgment over the seven churches, which reveals trends in the behavior of all the churches throughout history, up to our time, and to the parousia, that is, the return of Christ. Then, at the opening of the seven seals, the various scourges are described in general terms by four symbolic horses, along with the gathering of God's servants, the fear of man, the victory of the Lamb over the wicked, and the final judgment. The next seven trumpets sounded by the seven angels describe the calamities that affect mankind in a more detailed way, specifying the measure of 1/3 on the total, the damages caused by the scourges poured on earth. An important thing to be noted is that after the sixth trumpet described in chapters 9, 10 and 11, we are told that there would be no more delay, and that with the sound of the seventh trumpet the mystery of God would be fulfilled. And it is exactly in this context that we are given a specific temporal sign with counting of days, along with an acceleration of final events that will last, as we shall see, 7 more years. Chapter 9 says that the 4 angels who had been bound were then released and prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and of the year to kill the third part of the man. So immediately after, in chapter 10, we are warned that there would be no more delay and that God's judgment would be at hand.
And when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets.
It's chapter 11 describing the preaching of the 2 witnesses to provide us the exact time to start counting the last 7-year period. Verse 3 says exactly that their testimony would last 1,206 days or 3.5 years, biblically 3.5 times. Verse 7 adds,
And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them.
Note that chapter 13 begins by describing the beast that rises from the sea, and also here in verse 7 the same concept is reiterated.
And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them.
How long this war will last? Verse 5 tells us.
And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months.
So the 1260 days of preaching are equivalent to 42 months, plus the 42 months of persecution by the beast add up exactly to 7 final years. Now let's try to understand properly how God reveals to John the chronological events as far as the time of the end. The sequence is described chronologically with 24 visions given to John, introduced by the expressions "I saw, then I saw," or "after these things I saw." As already mentioned, the 7 seals, in particular the first 4 with the 4 horses, briefly describe the final flagella, while the 7 trumpets go into the detail, fixing the measure of the destruction caused by each one to 1/3. In a different way, the 7 final cups describe the devastation without fixing limits, because each affected entity is introduced by the generic preposition on man, on the sea, on rivers, on the sun. Sometimes, in the midst of the 3 groups of plagues, God announces in advance the epilogue, that is his final triumph after his judgment. For example, in chapter 5, before the opening of the 7 seals. Also in chapter 6, at the opening of the 6th seal. In chapter 11, before the 7th trumpet sounds, and also in chapter 14, before the 7 final cups. Actually, the Apocalypse is sequential, so after these interruptions showing in advance the triumph of final judgment of God and of his Lamb, the description of other events resumes. In fact, at the end of chapter 11, after the sound of the 7th trumpet and the description of God's final judgment, chapter 12 begins with the outbreak of war in heaven between Michael and Satan. This event actually happens earlier, that is, after the 1260 days of preaching by the 2 witnesses, and in the middle of the final 7 years. After Satan is overcome and thrown to earth, Scriptures tells us,
Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
So, having reached this point, it is understood from Scriptures that with the expression short time, it is meant another 42 final months of war against the saints. In fact, in verse 17 of the same chapter 12, it is said that,
And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
the same thing we are told in the verses already cited of Revelation chapter 11, verse 7, and chapter 13, verse 7.
And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them.
Summarizing, 42 months of preaching plus 42 months of persecution equals to 1 week of years, which is the famous last week of years included in the 70 weeks of years told by the prophet Daniel. In his chapter 9, verse 27, Daniel tells us this.
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease.
Not only that, but in chapter 12, again from Daniel, also in this case in verse 7, As for Revelation 11 and 13, we are told that
it shall be for a time, times, and an half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished.
from these verses of scriptures, it is clear that the persecution and the great tribulation will last the final 3.5 years of this system of things. Dear friends, the temporal cycle closes, and if you examine the study on the sabbatical years, the link can be found in the description of this video, you will understand that the work of God, or rather of Yhwh, to use his name, is based on the sacred number 7. This number is linked to the weekly Saturday and to the sabbatical year falling every 7 years, which God gave order to observe and sanctify. It is about 858 weeks of years, or sabbatical years, divided into 3 periods of 286 sabbatical years each, running from Adam to Abraham, from Abraham to Yeshua, that is Jesus, and from Yeshua to his return with the establishment of his millennial kingdom. Therefore, the last week of years included within this symmetry will be the next one, and it will start after the next sabbatical year, namely in 2023, and it will be concluded in autumn 2030. Moreover, not surprisingly, 2030 is the date set also by the mighty of the earth and by the UN itself. During the 42 months, or rather 3.5 times, ruled by the Antichrist, the ending chapters of Revelation will be fulfilled with the stronger and finer scourges poured by means of the 7 cups upon man, sea, rivers, sun, air, and on every living soul. The final part of Revelation deals with the fall of Babylon the Great, the removal of the beast, the false prophet, and the triumphal marriage of the Lamb. After that, the 1,000 years under the rule of God Yhwh will begin.
Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand.